Hi, hello everyone, greetings and salutations, it's Manimus. Welcome to another Rant is Live. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Thank you so much for being able to join me. I'm not going to waste much time, just going to get right into it because I got a few things I want to talk about. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that there seems to be this big push for Shadow. There seems to be this big push for these the old school, the classic video games, the retro games. They seem to be re-releasing on console, especially like we figure like your Nintendo Switch. They have their their Nintendo Pass, which they're releasing a handful of their Nintendo games, their classic games, in order to come up to repurchase to play, say like on the 3DS, on the Nintendo Switch, on you can see them on like cell phones, not so much Nintendo but like Sega with like their classic series, like their you have like your Golden Axe, and you have Ultra Beast, and you have Sonic, and you have Shinobi and whatnot. So I kind of thought to myself, there's, especially since now, like you had your Streets of Rage 4. So you had a sequel to an old franchise, Streets of Rage, that just came out and did pretty good. Just recently, they just released a new game for Battletoads. So that you have that's come out on console and PC and whatnot. And I kind of thought to myself, like, what were some video game franchises that I would like to see either re-released, or like remastered. And so I have a handful of games that I want to show you. So we're gonna flip this here. So the first franchise that I think would be really cool to get a re-release would be the Desert Strike series, or at least the Strike series, I should say. The biggest thing with that, to me, at least to me, that was just a very fun franchise. You figure they came out with a lot of games. And it was not just on Sega Genesis. They also had it on Super Nintendo. And even later on down the road, they ended up releasing 2 more sequels on the PlayStation. But they had Desert Strike, they had Jungle Strike, they had Urban Strike. On the PlayStation they had Nuclear Strike. So I really think that this franchise would translate decently to be a good, because the thing was it was considered a shoot 'em up game, kind of like your like similar to like your Contras or like your Zaxxons or your Galagas or whatnot, but there was more strategy behind it because of the fact that you had to rescue. You had to rescue POWs. You had to conserve your fuel and your ammunition. You had to really strategize how you wanted to go at it because you couldn't just go in full blazing. Otherwise, you would die and you would lose. And this is one of the games where, it was very. It was actually had a level of difficulty to it because of, you had multiple missions per map. And you could attack it any way you wanted, but the enemies had higher weapons than you. They had more ammunition than you. Things were strategically planted. Like I said, you had to rescue the POWs, and they were scattered across the map. They weren't clear to see. You had to sometimes destroy certain targets that weren't on your agenda in order to find them. So I think that would translate to a good franchise that could get possibly refueled or revigorated to current gamers, and not even just like a remake, but more of a bring it back out. And I think you would have a lot of people that would really get into this franchise. The next one I thought about. Let me flip it here. That was a game on Super Nintendo. It was called Fire Striker, or I think it was known as a different name. I think Holy Striker in Japan. But it had a setup that it was something like an RPG, because it was like set back in medieval times. There was different elements you had to do. There was different, like, the enemies were based off of medieval stuff. Like you had like dragons to face and witches and demons and things like that, archmages. But it was an overhead view action shooter, kind of similar to some other franchises. I'm trying to remember some, like, certain ones, or kind of like a breakout kind of gameplay aspect to it. So like, for example, here it says the 4 element-based kingdoms competed against each other for the Trial Light, a weapon that was designed by an archmage named Wild that can only be handled by Fire Striker. In the end, Wind Kingdom won and united the 4 realms under their control. The archmage was not content with the peaceful world and sent in 4 monsters to topple this united planet. So, like I said, I think that franchise would actually translate really good to current play, especially when you see like a lot of games that are like, there are new games, like the you have your indie games that were kind of set for they're brand new games, but they kind of have graphics and gameplay like a retro game, so like you have your 1980X and a lot of your, like I said, Broforce and whatnot, where they look like older games, but they actually are brand new games and they have brand new elements to them. So let's see here. Another game. Now this is kind of more like I said, me personally, I would love to see either reboot or some kind of a sequel to Xenogears. And I think the big thing about Xenogears to me was it was developed by Squaresoft, which obviously now we all know is Square Enix today. And it was, completely designed role-playing, kind of like your Final Fantasy style play, but it had where you had almost like attack elements to it, where you had to strategize, where you could actually, instead of just your typical, like your sword strikes or your arrow shots or whatnot, this year you actually had people who were fighting by hand, almost like a martial arts style attack aspect of it, where you actually had to choose: do you want to do a light attack, a heavy attack, a combination of both? Do you want to reserve and guard and build up your strength to do an even stronger attack? And then on top of that, basically add in almost like your like your Gundam style fighting, where your characters would actually get into these mech suits and actually fight in those as well. So that added another layer of combat to it. So really, really fun. Damn it, Shadow! It expanded across 3 discs, I think, on the PlayStation. But really, really fun. I love the franchise. I love the story. It was set, like, obviously set in the future, because obviously using the mechs and stuff, a lot of battling in space. So I personally, like, I don't even necessarily would like to get a sequel, or like if they would do a remake of this game, I think that'd be fantastic. If they would just re-release it on current gen console, I think that would be awesome. I would definitely be there to purchase it. But the thing is there was a bunch of Xeno franchises. Like they had, obviously there's Xenogears, but then a lot of people that are familiar with like the PlayStation 2, there was the Xeno Saga. The Xeno Saga is kind of set in the same like similarities of fight style, but they didn't have the whole fighting in the mech suits and the battle gears and things like that. And I think that's where this game really set itself apart. The last game I was thinking of And this, if anybody knows this franchise, they would understand. The video game I'm talking about is called Snatcher. Snatcher originally came out, at least for me, like I played it on the Sega CD. The game was released on the Sega Saturn. It was released on PlayStation, but there was only a English version of the game on the Sega CD. They re-released the game, like I said, on Sega Saturn, and they re-released it on PlayStation as a kind of like an enhanced version already, where they beefed up the graphics and beefed up everything, but it was completely in Japanese. So there are certain hacks, if you can play it, I believe, that'll put in the almost like somebody went through, like they went through and redubbed the English to the game, and it's like almost a hack you have to put into it. But the actual version of the game was only, like I said, only available in Japanese unless you had it on the Sega CD. 100% love this game. It kind of took an aspect of similarly almost like the Terminator franchise and kind of flipped it on itself a little bit, where the story of it was like that you have these robotic beings that could basically imitate anybody. In order for them to do it, they would have to kill the original host. So they would do it, and they would basically take over as that person. Everyone kind of thought in the world that these robotic beings were actually aliens, but it turned out that they were something completely different. It actually was the first, I think, the first sighting of they had a character called Metal Gear in the game that actually ended up being one of the mechanized weapons in Metal Gear Solid. They turned it into a full-fledged creature, obviously because it was not creature, but a weapon. Because obviously both games were made by Konami. But there was rumors for years and years and years and years that Konami was working on a sequel to this game, and it never came out. There was even points where they did interviews at the Konami studios, and you would see in the background like posters for Snatcher 2. And people would always like losing their mind, and there was always this thing about, is this game really going to come out? Is it really going to come out? And it never panned out. The other nice thing I liked about this is like it had a big, like a humongous story to it. It split it up into like 3 parts. But you would have to do all, because you played a detective, and you had to do all this investigating, and you had to figure out, the whole aspect and the whole intertwinings of the whole story and the mystery and everything. But then when it came down to actually fighting, it would go from just regular like textual and explorative gameplay to actual action, where you actually got to use the Justifier light gun, or you could use the controller too, but that was another way they could actually use the gun that was included with I think it was the Lethal Enforcers game for the PlayStation. So 100% I would love to see this game come back out. Like I would even accept it as a like a re-release, like for like the Sega Ages style game. If they would just re-release it, like even in its existing format, just re-release it with the English language to it. Like even if they didn't dub the voiceovers in English, if they wanted to keep the Japanese voices but just give us an English subtext so I can at least read it, absolutely 100% would love to see that. But we'll see what happens. I mean, at this point, I don't think the franchise is ever going to see a re-release, but you never know. I'm holding out hope. I'm really holding out hope. So we'll see what happens. But like those are some of my my picks that I would love to see that would come back out on current generation console. So big thing, like the question of the day is, which video game or video game franchise would you like to see a re-release or a remake of? But an old school game, would you like them to keep the old school style and just re-release it on current console so you can play it right now? Would you like to see a certain franchise remade? Like they just finished, Final Fantasy VII remake. They had the Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 3 remake, and we obviously saw how popular and how successful those franchises were and those games were. Would you like to see something in that aspect, or would you just like to see the actual original game in its, the game in its original form just re-released to play on current gen consoles? So let me know what you think about that. But I will be right back. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to move into our next subject. All right, so we're back. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is, so there's been this I don't necessarily say it was a growing controversy or a growing there's a growing conversation, and it's obviously concerning our current pandemic that's going on in the world, and obviously sports. A lot of people have been wanting to see sports back, have been wanting these players to get out and play, and actually the players themselves have been wanting to get out and participate and play and just get out there and just try to bring back some type of normalcy back to the world, back to their lives, back to our lives, things like that. So obviously at the beginning of the pandemic, they canceled all the sports that were playing over the winter, and obviously the spring. They brought back in condensed versions the seasons for the NHL. They brought back the NBA. They brought back Major League Baseball in a condensed season. They brought back soccer. So, and pretty soon, obviously it's the end of August, and pretty soon we're going to be in September. So obviously it's going to be American football. And my question is, obviously everybody who loves sports has been dying to have sports back and to see sports. And honestly, it's not even just to have the sport back, but actually to have some type of regulatory normalcy. And I see a lot of people that were posting on social media about how they're so excited for football to be back, and they're so excited for, obviously the professional football with the NFL, with college football, to be back. And I think to myself, is it possibly too soon, or is there the possibility that we are doing this too fast? And the reason why I say that is we brought back soccer, and it wasn't even just the United States. On the other side of the world, they brought back football. We call it soccer, but obviously they call it football. They brought it back because they had a much better control of the pandemic than we did, hands down. So we ended up eventually bringing back our own sports, which we brought back. First, we brought back the NBA basketball, and we brought back hockey with the NHL. Now, obviously, the NHL and the NBA both did a thing called where they did what you hear is the bubble. And the bubble is they basically took all these guys, tested 100% of the athletes, and then confined them basically to between the hotel that they were playing in and the and obviously the stadium that they were going to be playing in, and the hotel that they were staying in. In that aspect, now obviously we're into the playoff portions of those two sports. And both of those sports have had 0 reported positive cases of coronavirus. And obviously you can think about it, is the reason why is because they kept it where they pretty much cleaned the entire facility where they were playing at, and kept these guys isolated from the outside world, so that they had no interactions with going out to stores, going to restaurants, going to clubs, interaction with other people other than the individuals inside the bubble. So they never let the virus get in, and they kept it for the most part concealed out, completely sealed off. And it's worked. It's really worked. where then you have Major League Baseball, where they put in regulations for keeping this clean and wearing masks here and there, and they kind of hemmed and hawed about it. And you had one team come down with a lot of cases of positive readings of COVID-19, which then caused a tremendous turmoil where you had, I think, 3 teams total. Their games ended up being postponed or canceled, and that just caused a massive, uproar, because they supposedly followed guidelines, but they didn't necessarily really follow them to the point, or at least they left it where it's like, oh, these are the guidelines to the teams. You guys, you guys are, handle it yourselves. And obviously the Florida Marlins team, or Miami Marlins in Florida, did not do a good job. And then even to the point where I'm pretty sure the initial person that came down sick told the organization about it, and the organization just kind of let it go, because you could see in the play right before it came up how none of them were wearing masks. Then all of a sudden some of them were wearing masks. Then all of a sudden the whole lot of them were wearing masks from one day to the next day to the next day. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's this outbreak, and all of a sudden 16 people between players, coaches, and staff all came down with this virus. Now, at the time, they were playing, when this came out, they were playing the Philadelphia Phillies. The Philadelphia Phillies ended up having to quarantine their entire team, coaches, and staff because of possibility of spread. But luckily, none of them actually came down with a positive case. The other thing that it did is it also messed up I believe, the New York Yankees, because they were supposed to play the Philadelphia Phillies, and because of the Philadelphia Phillies having to be quarantined, then they couldn't play their game, so now their season had to get goofed up, and then they all had to make up this time where they had to play a bunch of double headers just to try to make up the season, make up the games. The other thing, but then ever since then, or not the other thing, but ever since then, when the commissioner of Major League Baseball really cracked down on these teams, like, look, either you're going to follow regulations, you're going to follow directions, or you're going to be you're out, you're done. So they got a much better handle of it, and luckily there hasn't been any reported cases. Now, kind of backtracking a little bit to the NBA and the NHL. I give absolute credit to the NBA, because the NBA did their bubble in Orlando, Florida at Disney. Whereas one of the major hotspots in the country at the time, and I think it still is right now at this point. They might have had their cases and death counts possibly go down, but let's face it, how much far could they really go when we're still having 1,000 deaths a day? But there's been 0 reported infection rates, and all those players have been playing good, and you've heard nothing about anybody coming down with anything. You've heard nothing about any outbreaks. You've heard nothing about any positive cases from there whatsoever. Especially now that the fact that they're in their playoffs. So now it's, once a team loses, the team's out, they leave, they're done, they don't get to come back. Which obviously, why would they? But that's beside the point. Which, the other thing too is, they didn't allow outside visitors. They didn't until just recently. They started allowing outside people, but then those people, you could only allow one, like their significant other could come for a day or 2 days or whatever. But they had to be tested and had to have a negative test before they were allowed to come in. And they had to be quarantined in the hotel rooms and things like that. Same thing with the NHL. You've heard nothing about any reported cases with that. Now, the thing is the NHL, they, between 2 ice arenas in Canada. So they didn't come to the United States at all. In fact, once everybody came there to start setting up, to start quarantining and getting into their bubble, they didn't allow anybody to leave or to come back to the United States. And actually the same way with the Toronto Blue Jays, they right now, they're not playing in Toronto. They're playing, I believe, I think it's Buffalo that they're playing in. So they're not even allowed to go back to Canada to go home. They're in the United States until this whole season is over. And then once those players want to go back to Canada, probably have to go through a quarantine phase and a testing phase to make sure that they're good, because Canada's not messing around. They don't want people from the United States. So the reason why I kind of bring all this up is you figure you have an NBA team. An NBA team at one time has 5 players on the court. Okay? NHL, you have 6 players on the ice. You figure you obviously have to have obviously player backups, people to sub in, things like that if there's injuries or if they're for resting and whatnot. So, but that's still a small group of people per team. The Major League Baseball, you have 9 players total on the field at once, and obviously you have your subs that come in that are sitting in the bullpen, and or not the bullpen, in the dugout, and then you actually have your backup baseball players, your pitchers, in the bullpen. That's still a small handful of people, and obviously you have like your coaching staff and your staff and things like that. When it comes to football, a football roster, and this is the professional football roster, is 53 players, just players. Then you have all your coaching, and then your coaches, like literally every single position has a coach in football. So you have like your head coach, you have your assistant head coach, your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator, you have your wide receivers coach, your quarterback coach, your defensive line coach, your offensive line coach, your special teams coach, on and on and on and on. So a football team by itself has probably close to, if not over, 200 people total per team. That is a lot of people to try and get a handle on, to get testing, to get possibly quarantined, to get them isolated before to play, to travel. And the thing is like it's not like all the teams are going to a central location and they're staying there like in the bubbles with the NBA and the NHL. They're all playing at their own, their home games are at home, their away games are at the other team's stadium, So it gets to a point where it's like, okay, especially you have teams that are traveling, you have like your Arizona, Dallas, Houston, you have in Miami, Tampa Bay, you have teams that have to go to these hotspots, and there's the major possibility of these guys getting infected and spreading. The only possible way is like if they're getting tested before they travel, they get tested again after they arrive, they get tested on the day of play. And I question, I really question, can the NFL really keep these guys safe? Keep these guys, quarantined and out of the possibility of infection and spread. And then you have like, because if you think about it, you have your collegiate players with college. Your major conference, like 3 of your major conferences have decided to not play this fall. So you have like, I think it's like your Big Ten, your Pac-12, and I think it was the SAC. But you still have other colleges that are participating and are playing. And it seems like everything you hear about is how much money these colleges are going to lose with them not playing collegiate sports, with them not playing college football. And I'm thinking to myself, are we still in that mindset that money outweighs health? Does money outweigh the safety of these athletes, these players, these students, these kids? And the same thing goes with at least with the professionals. They're taken into aspect. They're getting paid to do this, so there's a level of risk, obviously, with any, especially a full contact sport like football. There is definitely a risk that goes into it, where, at least if they would possibly come down with some type of disease, or if they come down with COVID-19, at least they're getting paid. At least they could afford for the treatments and the hospitalization or what have you, like God forbid if it gets that far, if something were to happen. A lot of these college kids, they would kind of be stuck on their own, wouldn't you think? I mean, if they're on their parents' medical, I mean, that's one thing. But some of these, especially if you're playing if you live, in say North Carolina, but you're playing in California. Well, now that's kind of like, a far distance away. To say, hey, mom, dad, I'm sick. I can't. Obviously, you can't travel back home. You're kind of stuck having to deal with what's happening there. And then the whole isolation aspect of it. And it brings a lot of questions to me. Like, can this possibly be handled properly? Can this possibly can they really limit the possibility of infection? And then I kind of think to myself, like, obviously it's like wear a mask, wash your hands, that kind of thing. And the thing is like that is absolutely crucial. It is obviously, social distancing, wearing a mask is very crucial. But some football players kind of can't wear masks while they play. I mean, they can possibly try, but you figure they're already wearing their mouth guards for their teeth because they're going to get hammered. And then I'm thinking to myself, how come they have none of these companies that develop the gear, the safety gear, the helmets, stuff, why couldn't they design some type of extra shield to go attach to these helmets to help these guys kind of keep, because there's a lot of sweat and spit and just all this stuff that comes off of these guys and exerts out of these guys. Why couldn't they come up with something that these guys could wear to help limit that exposure? Because with football, I mean, there is no social distancing unless you're a freaking wide receiver. There is no social distancing. Everybody is shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, shoulder into gut tackling. I mean, there is none of that. So it makes me wonder, how can the NFL and these franchises guarantee the safety of these players? And do we, as a viewing audience, can we feel comfortable with ourselves that we wanted sports to come back so bad that we would feel comfortable with ourselves if something would happen to these guys? I don't know, just a thought, just my opinion, but I just wanted to throw that out there for you guys. But I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll see you guys back in a minute here. All right, and we are back. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is, you hear a lot of stories about things that happen at people's work. You hear about things that happen to people out in, out when they're out traveling, or they're out going shopping, or they're out visiting family, or they're out at dinner. And you hear about these things that happen, and there's these situations that come up where people kind of step out of their normal shell, and they just kind of do things that are absolutely, either heroic or they're horrible. They just do things out of the ordinary of their normal character and whatnot. And it might even not be out of ordinary, out of their character or anything. Just things that people kind of step up and do things that other people might not be able to do. And I have a story that I want to share that happened to me a few years ago. That it's something that I'll never forget. It's something that still to this day a lot of people are amazed about what happened and whatnot. But I wanted to share it with you guys because I wanted to see what you guys think. So the most recent job that I worked for a distribution hub for a company, and one of the requirements of the job was we had to show up super early in the morning because we had to start processing orders. We had to pick orders, get them sealed, get them loaded up onto different shelves and whatnot, so that the delivery drivers could come in. They can go through their orders, gather up all the items, load them up into their vehicles, and head out on delivery to deliver all the orders and all the items. And I remember, like I said, I had to show up at, I think it was like 5 o'clock, between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning. And the area that the warehouse was located in is not the best location for, neighborhoods that it could be. Like, obviously, it was attached to an actual retail location, and the retail location did absolutely wonderful business. But the neighborhood that the retail location was in was not the best neighborhood. There was a lot of negative things that would happen in this neighborhood, and you can pretty much think of anything negative that you can think of. It's a possibility that this happened. I mean, let's put it this. I'll put it to you this way. Right next door was a hotel, or hotel, motel, whatever. One of those budget style motels or hotels, and down from that was a nightclub / strip club. And so you figure the hotel had a lot of business with individuals that would work at the strip club, and then they would leave, they would punch out from there, and then they would go to the hotel to do overtime. And that's the only way I could really put it to be polite about it. But on top of that, unfortunately, there was a lot of drug dealings that would go on there. And I'm not even talking about like marijuana. I'm talking about, the really hardcore, really horrendous drugs like cocaine and things like that. So there was definitely a lot of really scrupulous people that would wander around, like all hours of the night, walking. They would walking up and down the street. So especially like when we would show up at, 4 something in the morning, and we're in this, hardly lit parking lot, and you have people walking up and down the sidewalk in front of your parking lot, like you could barely see them. You don't know what they're up to, if they're just wandering just to go grab something from the local gas station, or if they're on their way to the hotel, or if they're on their way home from another job and they're just walking. You really didn't know. But with the way the neighborhood was, you had to make sure that you were definitely with somebody, another coworker or whatnot, because you never knew what happened. And there were stories of other locations across the country that people would go in and things would happen to these poor people at night. But I'm getting a little off topic. So I was on my way, and I was running a little bit behind when I left my home to head into work. And so it takes about 18 to 20 minutes to get there. And you figure this is at 4 something in the morning, so there's no cars on the road. But I left probably quarter of, so I was already running behind. And on top of that, it was raining. So I wasn't going to try and speed and whatnot, because who knows who will be walking where or whatnot. Or it's just better not to speed, obviously, in rain. So I show up to work. Like I said, I'm about 2 minutes late, 3 minutes late. So it's about 2-3 minutes after 5 o'clock, and I'm sitting in my car. I shut my car off, and I get out of my car, grab my lunch, go to grab my lunch kit. It was in the back seat of the car. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear this scream. And I turn around and I look, and there is a woman making a beeline right for me, coming, like, looks like she came from the hotel, and she's making this beeline right towards me. And she's wearing, she has socks on, her panties on, and a shirt, an unbuttoned shirt, and that's all she's wearing. But she's making a humongous, like, full speed charge right towards me. And like I said, she's screaming at the top of her lungs, ah! And I'm like, what the hell is this happening? And I kind of brace myself for, like, what the hell, like, am I being attacked or something? But then I noticed, I looked at her face, and half of her face is covered in blood. And she comes running at me, and like I said, she gets right up to me, and she like stops, and she's like, we need to get out of here. We need to get out of here. I gotta go. Please. I want to leave. I gotta go. And she's like kind of like pulling on me and trying to get in my car. And I'm like, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And I'm looking around, and she's pulling on the door handle of the car, like trying to open the door of the car and stuff. And I already had the car locked and stuff. And I'm, like I said, I'm kind of standing like at the front of my car. Because like I said, I got out of my car, was gonna walk around to go in the back of my car when this happened, and she started screaming. So she's pulling on the car, right? And then she runs around to the other side, and she's hiding behind the car. So say for example, you know, if you're at the front of the car, she runs around, she's at the rear passenger door. And she's like crouched down, and she's pulling on that handle, like frantically crying, you know, wanting to leave, like wanting to go up to the local gas station that was up there. She wanted me to get in the car and drive her away. And I'm looking around, and I can't figure out what's going on, right? And I'm telling her, and then finally I'm like, okay, you know, hold on, just wait, you know. And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, what would you think in a situation like that? You know, where that would happen and whatnot. So, I grabbed my keys. I unlocked my doors. She pulled the car door open, jumps into the back seat of my car, and doesn't even, like, jump into the back seat and sits. She jumps into the back seat of my car and actually dives onto the floor and pulls the door closed behind her. Like, she's hiding on the floor in the back of my car. And I can hear her muffled cries. She's still at that moment. It's like, can we go? Can we please go? Can we please go? And I'm like, okay. I locked the car door. I didn't leave the car. I stood there. Pulled out my phone. Like I said, it's raining out. I called inside the warehouse, and I got a hold of a guy. There was two guys inside at the time. One gentleman's name was Neil. The other gentleman's name was Leslie. I called Leslie, and I was like, hey, look it, don't ask me any questions right now. I need you to grab your jacket, come outside, don't run, don't anything, just come outside, just walk gingerly, walk over to my car, you know, and act like you're having a cigarette break. And he said, is it that bad? Like, he literally is like, is it that bad? I'm like, look, just come outside right now, no questions, just come out right now. And he goes, okay. He hangs up the phone from me. He tells the other gentleman, Neil, he's like, hey, there's something going on. I got to go outside right now. Neil goes, okay, go. He comes out the front door. Sure enough, jacket on. He's just walking gingerly over to me, pulls out his cigarettes, puts one in, pulls out his lighter, lights it up, walks up to me. He goes, what's going on? And I said, look in the back of my car. He kind of glances over my shoulder and looks in, and he can hear the woman. And he's like, is that? And I was like, yes. And I told him exactly what had just happened. So he's like, okay. I said, I don't know. I said, she's bad. She's beaten up badly. So I don't know. I said, I don't see anybody. Nobody was chasing her. I don't know what's going on. I said, I just need you to stand here. Right? I said, I'm calling the police. He's like, that's fine. So we're just standing there like we're nonchalantly just, you know, having a cigarette break or whatever outside in the rain and whatnot. And I call the police, you know, I call 911. They send an ambulance and police immediately. Within a couple minutes after hanging up the phone, the police, one squad car shows up. And I wave to the squad car. The two officers get out of the car, and sure enough, they gingerly just walk up to the two of us. And he's like, hey, you guys called 911? And I'm like, yes. And I said, this is the situation. And I explained everything to them. And he did the same thing. He glanced over, he looked in the back of my car, saw the girl. He's like, okay. And they just kind of stood there, right? They just acted like they stood there nonchalantly, just kind of shooting the shit with us. But he's like, grabs his radio, and he's radioing in, hey, we got this situation, da 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 da. And he's like, hey, where did she come running from? And I told him, I said, she came from this direction here. So he, just like I did, he kind of assumed she came from the hotel. She ran out the back of the hotel. So he's like, okay. Radioed in. The second squad car pulled into our parking lot, but then went out the other end and then went over to the hotel, like kind of like behind the hotel. And they started doing their search and their whatever. The ambulance shows up. Once the ambulance shows up, the police officer asked me to unlock the car, which I did. He goes right over, knocks on the door, and asks her to open the door. Once she opens the door, he kneels down and he just starts having a conversation with her, trying to coax her, get her to calm down, whatever, and get her to come out. And she's like terrified, she's worried, and all this stuff. And he's like, "Don't worry." He goes, "We got a handful of police here. The ambulance is here to take a look at you. Don't worry, you're safe now." That kind of thing. So he goes and he walks. She gets her to come out, and they go over to the ambulance. So Leslie and I are standing there, and this is probably a good 10 minutes goes by, and we're just standing there and whatnot. And the two police officers walk over to us again, and they ask us, what's your name, what's your phone number? We just want to take, for witnesses. We want to put, we want to have it written down for records and things like that. And the two of us are like, yeah, no problem whatsoever. And we gave her our information. And Leslie goes, did she tell you anything? And the police officer goes, yeah. He goes, apparently she hooked up with a guy to have a nightcap, basically. And they start getting down to it, and she starts undressing. And once she gets to a certain part of undressing, there's a knock at the door. She goes up to open the door. There's another woman on the other side and immediately hits her and knocks her down. The two of them then start to viciously beat her up horrifically because they were robbing her. And they figured the woman who's a prostitute had a bunch of cash on her for some reason. So they were basically trying to beat her up, and she somehow got out of the room, but just wearing what she had on at the time when she was attacked, which is why all she had on was underwear, socks, and a half open, or a completely open T-shirt. Which I thought about at the time, I don't think it was an actual open. I think it was literally just a ripped T-shirt. But she was scared of getting in trouble and whatnot, and so she was giving them a hard time about what room she was staying in and whatnot. But the cops were kind of like, they were surprised that she obviously made it out okay, and she survived, and and that I just stood there and hit her in my car, not knowing what direction they could have been coming from, if they were chasing after her, if they could have been like trying to kill her, they could have been trying to shoot her, something, so, and I didn't even think about that when it was happening. Obviously once it was done and over with, I thought about it a lot. I thought about it so much that that's a possibility that could have happened. So it's one of those things where you don't know what you would do until a situation comes up. A lot of people would say, oh, I would definitely do this, and oh, I definitely wouldn't do that. But you don't know. You don't know what goes through your mind once something like that is actually happening. Once a situation, of that magnitude or of that, intensity would happen, like, you just don't know what somebody would or would not do until it would actually happen. So, just something I wanted to share with you guys. So I'm going to take another quick break, and then I'm going to show you guys a video, and then we'll get to our conclusion of the day. So give me 1 second. All right, and we're back. So to get into it, so the next thing I want to show you guys is I want to show you a video. One of my favorite comedians of all time, at least of this generation, is a gentleman by the name of Lewis Black. And he's been in so many things. He's been doing stand-up for years. He was a frequent on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. He was still a frequent with Trevor Noah when he took over for The Daily Show. He's been in movies. He's done TV. He's done acting. He's been a writer. So he's been doing a lot of touring over the last few years, doing different shows. And he's, in my opinion, one of the most hysterical people ever. But he did this series, or he does this thing, where during his show, he does, Shadow. He does this thing where you can submit in rants, basically, things you want to complain about, things you want to talk about. And he does it every single show. And the thing is he'll do his entire set, which is a little over an hour long. He'll take a quick break, and then he'll do this set, and then he'll stream it live to the world off of his website, which it used to be his website. Now he was doing it through YouTube. So I've been to his shows, several times, or not several, but a few times before, my wife and myself. And this time there was a show March 9th of 2019 where he was in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And we went to a show, and I figured, you know what? I'm just going to submit something in. And what I did was I had a story that I had written years prior about an incident that happened in one of my other retail locations that I used to work at, with my interaction I had with a customer. And it was literally, this is how the conversation happened. So all I did was I found the old post I put on Facebook, copied it, pasted it in, and just sent it to him. And he actually read it on stage. So, and not only did he read it on stage, where it was broadcast live over the internet, they actually went and took a clip of that section of that day and posted it on his YouTube channel. And it's gotten a fairly good response. It's gotten, let me see here.
Another thing that shows what
I didn't want to start playing it. I didn't mean to do that. It's got over 221,000 views. Its like ratio is 2,854 likes to 60 dislikes. So a majority of people really like it. So that's more of what I'm saying than anything. So I wanted to show this to you guys. And the reason why I wanted to show it to you is when he read this on stage, and
another thing,
and I heard the reaction to everyone. That's kind of the thing that made me want to put videos up on YouTube, to be a content creator, essentially. And I had a lot of people tell me I should have been doing it for years, for years and years ago. People told me to do it, and I just never did it. But when I did this, one of my comedic idols reads a story that I submitted live on stage, and he just loves it. And then he reads it to his audience, and his audience loves it. It means the world to me. So I wanted to share it with you guys and actually react to it, and actually clarify a few things, because I think there's the one thing that people didn't understand when he's reading the story. Some people got, majority of everybody got it, but then some people didn't get it. So the name of the video that he posted, let me flip it around here. So the name of the video that he posted was The Hell of Retail. So this is actually live from his show. So let's get into it here.
Another thing that shows what's wrong with America. This is from Matthew's here tonight. Matthew, thanks for this. I rarely get dialogue. This is, I used to work for an electronics retailer, and this conversation pretty much summed up every day at work. Me, hi, how can I help you? Them, I want to pay my bill. Okay, for what? For me.
Okay, so at the time when I did this, I was actually managing a retail location, and this would happen so much. This was probably back in 2000. It was either 2012 or 2013 when this was happening. Actually, was at the location that from last week when I showed the ghost video. This is where this particular incident happened, and this is, I posted it. Not the same day, obviously, but this is where. But figure back between 2012, a lot of people would come in, instead of paying on their phone or paying online, a lot of people still went to the physical store that they and paid bills at stores. So they didn't do it where it was like electronically deducted. They didn't do it where it was auto pay. That just wasn't a mass use thing at the time, not compared to today. And which is hysterical because this is only 8 years ago or so. So, but I just wanted to clarify that like this was a thing that actually happened back 8 years ago. So that's why I'm talking about it. So
My bill. Okay, for what? For me? No, not who, for what? What? Yes. Yes, what? Let me try again. What do you want to pay your bill for? For me.
Yes. So, yes, the biggest thing when doing our training is they want us to talk to people just kind of like naturally. They wanted to talk, but they didn't want us to talk to them, so simplistically. Like we're basically talking to them like they're like people are not intelligent. So they want us to talk to people like they know what we're talking about, and if and then if they obviously didn't know, they were expected to ask us, well, I'm not sure what you mean by that, or can you explain by that, or whatever. So when I'm asking, well, okay, what do you want to pay your bill for? What I'm asking is like, what do you want? Do you want to pay your cell phone bill? Do you want to pay, for satellite? Do you want to pay for your store credit card? Do you want to pay for, there was at least almost a dozen things that we took payments for. So when I say, oh, what do you want, for what? Like, I want to pay my bill. Okay, for what? Well, so it's like, oh, like what do you want to pay? And that's what we were referring to. So when I'm saying, okay, for what? And he's going, well, for me. It's like, well, obviously we know it's for you because you just said I want to pay my bill, but not everybody gets that.
For me. For your card? For your phone? My phone. Great. What phone? This phone. He holds the phone up in the air. No. Who's your phone with? I don't know. He looks at the phone. Samsung.
That happened so much with us, where we would say, okay, like, because we sold phones, cell phones for Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, Boost Mobile, Virgin Mobile, Cricket, Trumpet. Like, we sold phones for so many different companies. So when we're like, okay, what phone do you want to pay? Like, which one? Which company do you want to pay? And the customers were literally like, well, I want to pay for this one. Well, a lot of companies had the same phone. So we're like, well, that doesn't help us. So then they would look at it and see the manufacturer, and they would say, hey, this is who I'm paying. No, that's not how it works.
He looks at the phone. Samsung. Oh, not who made your phone, the service. I don't have phone service, just this one. Your phone doesn't work? It works. That's why I want to pay my bill.
So, and at the time, you're like, cell phones are a service, like your television, like your electricity, they're a service. So you say, okay, well, which service do you want to pay? Like, which company was it that you had? And he's like, well, I don't have phone service. He's thinking I'm saying, well, who's your home phone? And he's like, I don't have a home phone. I just have the cell phone. But he didn't realize that, yes, home phone is a service, but also your cell phone is a service. So the customer just wasn't getting it. So I was trying to be as polite as possible, trying to get it out of him to tell me, but at the same time, like every time when I would ask him bluntly, he wasn't getting the blunt asking either.
Just this one. Your phone doesn't work? It works. That's why I want to pay my bill. It works. That's why I want to pay bill. His grammar, not mine. So you do have phone service? No phone service, just cell phone. Okay, then who's the cell phone with? Samsung? No. Whose bill are you paying? Mine. Who are you giving the money to? You.
Yes, that actually did happen. So as he was saying it, yes, I was actually getting flustered. I'm like, no, whose bill are you paying? Mine. Once again, he's like, mine. I'm like, no, not whose bill. No, who are you giving the money to? Meaning, what company are you giving the money to? And he just goes, you. Like, yes, I am giving you the money. So I kind of stood there to myself, and I'm like, yep, I deserve that.
Bill are you paying? Mine. Who are you giving the money to? You. Okay. I asked for one. I asked for that one. Okay. What company is your cell phone with? Boost Mobile. Thank you. How much? How much what? You paying? Yes. Yes what? Yes, I paying. No. Sighing again. How much are you paying? I don't know. Well, what did you pay last time?
And that's the thing too. I'm literally asking him, okay, how much? Like, what are you paying? And he's like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, how do you not know what your bill is? You know you have to come in and pay the bill, and you have absolutely no idea what the bill is. So, and I'm like, and the thing is the funny thing is he told me that it was Boost Mobile. So Boost Mobile had set plans. So they either had, plan A, plan B, plan C. So if you just told me I have this, okay, I knew exactly what it was. And he had not only did he have no idea, but
yes what? Yes, I paying. No. Sighing again. How much are you paying? I don't know. Well, what did you pay last time? I don't know. Third base.
Okay, so the reference for third base is there's another comic duo that I absolutely loved, and that was Abbott and Costello. And I pretty much saw every single one of their films growing up. My parents shown me, at least I should say my parents, my father showed me like all their films that they ever did. So absolutely 100% some of the best one-liners ever from that duo. And the thing is, you figure back, they were around the time, Abbott and Costello were around the time of, you figure Laurel and Hardy. They were around the time of the Three Stooges. They were around the time of, the Honeymooners and whatnot. So that old school comic delivery was 100% like distilled into me. So when I'm hearing the gentleman say over and over again, I don't know, something just clicked in my head and I had to say it. And the I don't know reference is, look up, if you ever have the time to look up on YouTube, Abbott and Costello, look up who's on first. And that's what it's referencing to.
Yes. Yes what? Yes, I paying. No. Sighing again. How much are you paying? I don't know. Well, what did you pay last time? I don't know. Third base.
And the fact that he starts smiling is like...
What? Nothing. How long have you had your phone for? A month? Okay. So it's brand new. No, I got it last month. I ignore the comments. So you paid $55. I guess, can't you look it up? We don't keep a record on our computers of your account, but it should be $55. What's your phone number? I don't know. I reach out for the phone as the customer places it in my hand, looks up the number, enter it into the system, take his money, hand him his receipt without so much as another spoken word spoken between us. Well done.
So that happening for me, where
I'm releasing a plan to save lives. That
comedian reads my story live in front of his audience, just that pretty much sealed it for me. That, like, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a content creator. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be, I wanted to do what I could do to make things and create things. So just thought it was some quick little video I wanted to show. Like I said, why I do what I do, why I make what I make. So I'm going to take a quick break, and we're going to get to the final stretch here. So give me 1 sec. All right, and we are back. It's time for ChatBox. So let's take a look at our chat we have. Vile Knight 12. Hey, Matt. Hey, Vile Knight. Thank you so much for stopping by during my show. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you jumping into the chat. Thank you so much. I hope your day is going absolutely wonderful. I hope you saw the question of the day. Like, which video game franchise would you like to see re-released or remade? So if you have that, let's see if we have anybody else in here at the time. All right, looks like we don't have anybody right now. Anybody else more? So, and that's okay. That's fine. So that is going to do it for me for the Rant is Live. Thank you so much to everybody that watched and listened along while I told my stories and talked about my opinions on things. So I really appreciate it. I will be back on probably later today with some gameplay. But I do appreciate everyone swinging by and stopping in and jumping into the chat and leaving a message. Or if you didn't, you just watch me do my thing here. I still appreciate it. So everyone, have a wonderful day. I will, like I said, be on later, and if you're there, that it will be awesome. But as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Take care now.